TLC built an entire brand around one word: love. Love multiplied. Love without limits. Love that looked different and asked you to expand your definition of what a family could be. That was the promise. That was the marketing. That was the tagline they put on billboards and promos and season premieres for nearly 2 decades. And somewhere inside that promise, inside that carefully constructed story about a family loving bigger and louder than most people thought possible, a little girl named Truly Brown grew up on camera. And the network that claimed to be filming love watched something very different happen to her. And they aired it anyway. And they made money from it. And nobody said a word. If that sentence just made something shift in your chest, you are exactly where this video needs you to be. If this kind of unflinching look at what really happened inside the SisterWives universe is what you came here for, hit like right now and subscribe to SisterWives Crew, because this channel goes where the other accounts won't. And what I'm about to walk you through in the next several minutes is something that has been hiding in plain sight for 18 seasons. Let's start at the beginning. Not season 16, not the collapse, not Cody's infamous couch confessionals, or the moment Christine packed her bags, or the slow-motion dissolution of everything the show told us this family represented. Let's start at the actual beginning, because understanding what SisterWives became requires understanding what it genuinely was first. The early seasons of this show worked, and I don't mean they worked as television in the cynical sense. I mean they worked because something real was happening inside that family. There were moments of warmth between those adults that were not manufactured. There was a household that, despite its unusual structure, had genuine rhythms of love running through it. The kids played together, the wives cooked together. Cody was present in a way that, whatever you think of his choices, was visible and real on screen. Viewers who fell in love with SisterWives in those first few seasons were not being foolish. They were responding to something authentic. That authenticity is important to hold on to, because it's the foundation on which everything that followed was built. And foundations matter most when the building above them starts to crack. Here's what the early seasons also gave TLC: a proof of concept, a format, a family whose access they had secured, a viewership that was emotionally invested, and a commercial structure of sponsorships, ad rates, streaming deals that depended on that viewership continuing to tune in. That's not a conspiracy. That's just how television works. But it's also the context you need to understand when we talk about what happened as the seasons went on and the cracks became impossible to hide. Because here's the thing about reality television that distinguishes it from every other form of entertainment. The product is real people. Not characters, not performances, real human beings with real emotional lives, living through real experiences and being filmed while they do it. When a scripted drama films a child actor crying, that child goes home afterward. The tears were real, perhaps, but the situation that caused them was constructed. There are protections built around that child. Labor laws, welfare workers on set, legal requirements. The system is imperfect, but it exists. It was built because society made a determination at some point that children deserve protection from being used for their emotional output in the service of commercial entertainment. Now ask yourself what protections exist for a child who isn't acting, a child who is simply living inside a family that a network has chosen to document, for profit, across nearly 2 decades. The answer is almost nothing. Child performers have the law behind them. Reality TV children born into shows, raised in front of cameras, given no meaningful ability to consent, exist in a legal gray area that the American entertainment industry has been operating inside comfortably and quietly for as long as reality television has existed. Truly Brown was born into that gray area. She did not choose it. She did not audition for it. She arrived into a world that had already agreed to be filmed, and the cameras were already rolling. That is not a small thing. That is actually one of the most important things I'm going to say in this entire video, because everything else, every editorial decision, every scene selection, every season that continued filming as the family's internal reality became increasingly painful. Everything that followed happened inside a legal and ethical structure that gave Truly Brown essentially no protection, and TLC essentially no accountability. Now, let's talk about what TLC chose to do with that situation. Every frame of SisterWives that you have ever watched was a deliberate choice. People talk about reality TV as though it's unmediated, as though cameras just roll and audiences see what happened. That's not how it works. Every episode of Sister Wives was shot over days or weeks. Every season generated hundreds of hours of raw footage. That footage was reviewed by producers, by editors, by network executives. And from those hundreds of hours, a tiny fraction was selected, sequenced, scored with music, and aired. Someone watched all of it. And for every scene that made it into the final cut, someone made a conscious decision. This one stays. Think about what that means when we apply it specifically to Truly Brown. Every moment of Truly that aired, every confused question she asked on camera, every background moment she appeared in during a scene about her parents' deteriorating marriage, every interaction between her and a father who was visibly pulling away from half his family was reviewed by a professional adult whose job was to select content for broadcast. And those professionals chose to include those moments, not because they slipped through, because they served the episode, because they served the season arc. Because a child's genuine confusion and pain, framed correctly, is emotionally compelling content, and emotionally compelling content sells advertising. I want to be careful here, because I'm not interested in making claims I can't support. I'm not saying anyone sat in an editing suite and decided to hurt Truly Brown. I don't think that's how this works. I think what actually happened is both more mundane and more disturbing than that. I think the people making these editorial decisions were operating inside an industry framework in which the emotional reality of the children on screen was simply not the primary consideration. The primary consideration was the show, the arc, the ratings, and the children truly included were part of the landscape of that story, rather than people whose interior lives needed to be protected from the camera. That distinction between deliberate cruelty and institutional indifference matters. Because institutional indifference is actually harder to fight. You can call out a villain. You can expose a bad actor. Indifference doesn't have a face. It has a business model. And Sister Wives had a business model. And around seasons 16 and 17, that business model started doing something very specific. The ratings went up. As Cody Brown's relationships with Christine, Janelle, and Mary collapsed as the family structure that the show had been built around visibly fell apart, the audience grew. More people tuned in. More people were watching during the most painful seasons of this family's documented life than during the seasons when things were functional. TLC had, in the language of commerce, a hit on its hands. And that hit was being generated by suffering. Real suffering. Documented, broadcast, and monetized suffering, affecting not just the adults who had signed contracts and accepted payment, but the children who had done neither. Now, I want to ask you something that I think is genuinely complicated, and I want you to sit with it rather than answer it immediately. Is it possible that TLC had a financial interest in the Brown family's suffering continuing? Not as a statement of what TLC wanted emotionally. Networks don't want families to suffer. But structurally, commercially, the worse things got inside that household, the better the show performed. The family was, in a very specific sense, more valuable to TLC falling apart than it would have been healing. A healthy, functional, resolved Brown family would have had nowhere for the show to go. A family in documented freefall had seasons of content ahead of it. I'm not asking you to conclude that TLC engineered the collapse. What I'm asking you to notice is the structure, because structures create incentives, and incentives shape decisions. And decisions determine what gets filmed, what gets aired, and what protection, if any, gets extended to a child who is caught in the middle of all of it. Truly, Brown was caught in the middle of all of it. And here is something that the conversation around Sister Wives almost never addresses directly, something that I think sits at the absolute center of this entire story. There is a practice in reality television production that insiders have spoken about publicly, not in reference to Sister Wives specifically, but in relation to the genre as a whole. The practice involves identifying emotionally resonant footage of younger cast members during periods of family stress, using that footage to anchor episodes and season arcs for maximum emotional impact, and editing carefully around anything that might trigger the limited regulatory attention the genre does receive, while keeping everything that generates audience engagement intact. It is not a secret practice. People who have worked in this industry have described it openly. It has no formal name in most contexts, but the effect it produces is consistent. Child cast members become emotional anchors for adult storylines, their visible confusion or distress serving as the most authentic texture in a show that is otherwise highly produced. Now, ask yourself this question, and I genuinely want you to think about it before you move on. What would the answer be if someone submitted a public records or press inquiry asking TLC to describe the specific child welfare protocols they implemented during the SisterWives seasons that covered the Brown family's most destabilizing period? The seasons when Cody was pulling away from 3 of his wives. The seasons when the household was fracturing. The seasons when Truly Brown was at an age where children understand more than adults assume and less than they need to. What would TLC say? There is no public record of TLC implementing any additional child welfare oversight during those seasons. There is no public statement from the network about the well-being of the minors documented during that period. There has been no acknowledgement from TLC, from producers, from anyone in the production apparatus of any concern about what it meant to film a child living through a genuine family crisis and broadcast that footage to a streaming audience. 18 seasons. And silence. Let that land for a second, because I think we sometimes move through information so quickly that we don't let the weight of it actually settle. 18 seasons of a show that documented a family including children who never consented to be documented. And at no point did the network responsible for that documentation feel compelled to say publicly, here is what we did to make sure the kids were okay. Here is the standard we held ourselves to. Here is the line we chose not to cross. That silence isn't neutral. Silence from an institution with this much access, this much footage, and this much financial stake in the story it was telling is itself a kind of statement. It says, we did not believe we owed that conversation to anyone. Not to the audience, not to the advocates, not to the children themselves. The cameras rolled. The seasons aired. The ad revenue came in. And the welfare of Truly Brown was, apparently, not a matter that required public accounting. Now, I want to take you somewhere that most SisterWives coverage never goes. I want to talk about something permanent. Truly Brown cannot take her childhood off Netflix. Read that sentence again, because I think it's the single most important fact in this entire conversation, and it almost never gets said directly. Every moment of Truly Brown's childhood that aired on SisterWives exists in a publicly accessible streaming library. Right now. Today. It was there yesterday. It will be there tomorrow. It will be there when Truly is 25. It will be there when she is 35. If she has children of her own one day, those children will be able to access footage of their mother as a little girl, processing her father's emotional withdrawal, navigating a household in visible crisis, existing as a background presence in scenes about adult failures she had no power over and no understanding of. Nobody asked Truly Brown if this was acceptable. Nobody could have her as a child, but the adults around her, the network above her, and the legal system that was supposed to protect children in entertainment contexts all had opportunities to address this reality, and none of them did. The documentation exists. It is permanent. It is searchable, and Truly Brown will carry the fact of that permanence for the rest of her life, whether she ever speaks about it publicly or not. This is what distinguishes her situation from every other difficult childhood experience. When most people grow up in a household going through crisis divorce, estrangement, family breakdown, those experiences live in memory. In the memories of the people who were there, in private conversations, in the impressions it leaves on the people who lived it. It is real, and it is painful, and it shapes who those people become. But it is not cataloged. It is not indexed. It is not available for strangers to watch on their phones at 2 in the morning while they scroll through a streaming platform. Truly Brown's most vulnerable moments are, and that distinction between a painful childhood and a publicly archived painful childhood is something that our culture genuinely has not figured out how to reckon with yet. Reality television created this problem, and reality television has never been held seriously accountable for it. And the children who were filmed inside it are living with consequences that the adults who made the decisions are not. I want to pause here and do something that I think is genuinely rare in this kind of content. I want to talk about you, the person watching this, because there is a layer to this story that gets uncomfortable fast, and I think it's worth going there anyway. The SisterWives audience and I include this channel's audience in that, and I myself have had a complicated internal relationship with its own viewership for a while now. Especially in the later seasons. Especially as the nature of what the show was actually documenting became impossible to look away from. There are longtime fans of Sister Wives who have expressed, in comment sections and forums and Reddit threads, a genuine discomfort with what their continued viewership meant. A sense that by watching, by engaging, by discussing, by keeping the show culturally alive, they participated in the commercial ecosystem that kept those cameras trained on that family. That discomfort is honest, and I think it deserves to be honored rather than dismissed. Here is the truth as I understand it. Every view counts. Every season renewal was, in part, driven by ratings. Every social media conversation that kept Sister Wives trending contributed to TLC's confidence that continuing the show was commercially justified. The audience was not a passive observer of what happened to the Brown family. The audience was, structurally speaking, a participant in it. Not the primary one, not the most responsible one, but a participant nonetheless. I am not saying that to make anyone feel guilty. Guilt without action is just punishment, and that's not what this conversation is for. What I'm saying is that the relationship between audiences and reality television is not as clean as we sometimes pretend it is. We don't just watch. We fund. We validate. We signal to networks that the content is worth producing. And when the content involves real children living through real pain, that signal has real consequences. Naming that directly, sitting with it, rather than deflecting it, is, I think, the beginning of a more honest relationship with this genre. And that honesty matters, because what comes next in this story is not just about the past. Let me tell you about where this is heading, because this story is not finished. The legislative conversation around child welfare in reality television has been slowly, imperfectly, and inadequately evolving. California passed limited protections for child reality TV participants in 2023, the first significant movement in this space in years, and still widely considered insufficient by advocates who have been pushing for stronger standards. The argument for these protections rests on a simple premise. A child who is filmed for commercial entertainment, regardless of whether that filming is called acting or documentary or reality, is being used to generate revenue for adults. And children deserve protection from being used in that way without meaningful consent, meaningful compensation, and meaningful safeguards for their emotional and psychological welfare. The argument against stronger protections, to the extent that anyone makes it publicly, is essentially a First Amendment argument about documentary access and a commercial argument about the cost of compliance. Nobody actually argues, out loud, that it's fine to film children during family crises and sell that footage without any additional obligation to those children's welfare. Nobody defends it directly. The defense is always procedural, always about why specific regulation is complicated, why enforcement would be difficult, why the existing framework is adequate. And the existing framework has produced Truly Brown's situation. So here is my prediction. And I want to be clear that it is a prediction, not a certainty. Not a report, but a reasoned projection based on where this conversation is going. As the legislative push for reality TV child welfare protections continues to build, the documented experiences of children like Truly Brown are going to become central to that argument. Not because Truly will necessarily choose to be an advocate. She may never speak publicly about any of this. That is entirely her right and her choice. And nothing in this video should be read as pressure for her to do otherwise. But her story is already publicly documented. Already part of the streaming record will be referenced. It already is being referenced in quieter corners of this conversation than a YouTube channel, but in conversations that matter. Researchers, advocates, journalists covering the intersection of entertainment law and child welfare know this story. They are watching. The most quietly significant thing about Truly Brown's situation is that she doesn't have to do anything for it to matter. The documentation already exists. The timeline of what happened is already on the record. And as the legal and ethical conversation about reality TV's relationship with children evolves, that documentation will be cited. It will be used. It will do work in the world toward protecting children who haven't been born yet into reality television families. Children whose parents are right now considering signing contracts with networks. Children who will have no more ability to opt out than Truly did. That would be, if it happens, one of the most improbable forms of justice in this entire story. A child whose story was used to generate revenue for a network without her consent, without adequate protection, without any public accounting from the institution that profited from it, may end up being the case study that changes the framework for the next child. Not because she fought for it, not because she chose it, simply because it happened. and it was filmed, and the record exists, and the record cannot be erased. That is both a tragedy and a possibility. And I think holding both of those things at once is the most honest relationship you can have with this story. Now, I want to address something directly before I close this out, because I know this kind of content raises a question that is worth answering openly. Is a video like this one any different from the thing it's criticizing? It's a fair question. I'm talking about Truly Brown's experience on a public platform. I'm using her story to generate views for this channel. The self-awareness required to sit with that question honestly, rather than deflect it, is part of what I hope distinguishes this content from the noise. So here's my answer. As straight as I can give it, there is a difference between analysis and exploitation, and that difference lives in intention, framing, and accountability. This video is not using footage of Truly Brown's distress for emotional impact. It is not airing her most vulnerable moments for entertainment value. It is not selling advertising against her pain. It is asking structural questions about the institutions that did those things, and asking the audience to examine its own relationship with those institutions. That is a different activity. It does not carry zero responsibility. I am aware that it doesn't, but it is not the same thing as what TLC did. And I think maintaining that distinction honestly is important. What I am doing is having a conversation. What TLC did was build a commercial product. The subjects of that product were real people who did not choose to be products. And the youngest of those people, including Truly Brown, had no meaningful way to protect themselves from what that meant. That is the story. That is the whole story. And it has been hiding inside 18 seasons of footage that millions of people watched and discussed and renewed with their viewership, without the full shape of it ever being put into words quite this directly. Until now. So here's what I want to leave you with. Not a conclusion exactly, because I don't think this conversation has a clean ending, but a question. One question that I want you to take into the comments section and actually answer, because I read them, and the conversations that happen there are genuinely the reason this channel exists. Do you think audiences bear any responsibility for what reality television does to the children filmed inside it? Not guilt. I am not asking about guilt. Guilt is passive. It sits in your chest and doesn't move anything. I am asking about responsibility. Responsibility is active. Responsibility asks, now that I know this, what do I do with it? Do I watch differently? Do I think about what I'm funding when I hit play? Do I support legislative advocacy for reality TV child welfare protections? Do I say, out loud, in spaces where it might matter, that the children in these shows deserve better than what the current framework gives them? Responsibility asks what comes next. And I think that's actually a more interesting question than guilt, and a more useful one, and one that has real answers rather than just feelings. Tell me your honest answer in the comments. This is a space where real conversations happen, and I mean that not as a content strategy, but as a genuine description of what I want this channel to be. A place where the SisterWives universe gets examined with the seriousness it has always deserved and almost never received. If this video made you think if it shifted something, raised something, opened something you hadn't considered before, hit like. Not for the algorithm. Though I won't pretend the algorithm doesn't matter. Hit like because it signals that this kind of content, careful, structural, willing to go where it's uncomfortable, is worth more of your time and mine. And subscribe to SisterWives Crew, because what is coming next in this series is something I have been building towards since the very first topic. Every video in this series has been a piece of a larger picture, and the next video is the one where the full picture comes together, with the connection that runs through all of it, the thread that ties Cody's behavior, TLC's decisions, the audience's relationship with the show, and the future of reality television ethics into a single, coherent, genuinely shocking story. I have been sitting on that video for weeks. I have been waiting until this channel had the audience that deserved to receive it, and we are almost there. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and come back, because the most important thing I have to say in this entire series, I haven't said it yet.